This story is titled, At Our Family Gathering, They Banned Me from the Table and Kicked Me Out of the House, so I revealed the $5,000 trip I had planned for my parents. But now I'm taking my friends instead. Now they're begging for forgiveness because they desperately need a break from work. Sup Reddit, my name is Marcus, and I'm 31 years old. I own a landscaping company here in Las Vegas that specializes in high-end outdoor renovations, custom pools, outdoor kitchens, fire features, basically the whole luxury outdoor living experience. While most people see the success I have now, what they don't see is the 6 years of absolute hell it took to build this business from nothing. I started this company back in 2018 with just myself, a beat-up truck, and credit cards that were already maxed out to their limits. During that first year, I was desperate enough to take literally any job that would pay me. I did deck repairs, fence installations, concrete work, anything to keep money coming in and the lights on. Those early days meant putting in 19-hour workdays, 7 days a week, with no breaks and no days off. My hands became permanently stained with dirt and concrete dust, no matter how much I scrubbed them. My back felt like it was being held together with duct tape from all the heavy lifting and physical labor. To save money on gas and maximize my time on job sites, I actually started sleeping in my truck during weekdays. My bedroom became the cab of a 2009 Silverado with 185,000 miles on the odometer. That truck's heater only worked about half the time, and let me tell you, winter nights in Nevada aren't nearly as mild as people think they are, especially when you're trying to sleep in what's essentially a metal box with broken climate control. I lost my apartment after a client completely stiffed me on a $14,000 patio job. The guy claimed the stonework wasn't exactly like the picture he had in mind, even though our contract specifically stated that natural stone varies in color and pattern. That's literally what makes it natural stone. That experience taught me an expensive lesson about payment schedules and requiring deposits up front. When I looked into hiring a lawyer to go after the money he owed me, the attorney wanted $6,000 just to start the legal process. That was money I simply didn't have at the time, so I had to write off the entire loss and move forward. Year 2 marked a turning point when I managed to land a small pool installation job for a retired couple. Before that project, my entire portfolio consisted of nothing more than phone pictures of the decks and patios I'd built. These people took a chance on me primarily because their nephew had played on the same high school baseball team I did years back. It's funny how family connections can get you in the door, but they'll only get you a chance. You still have to deliver quality work to earn their trust. Fortunately, I did deliver, and they were so pleased with the results that they referred me to their neighbor. That neighbor was equally satisfied and referred me to their son. This is networking 101 in action. One satisfied customer leading to another, building a reputation one project at a time. During this period, I hired my first employee, Carlos, who's still with me today, and has become absolutely invaluable to the operation. I found Carlos working as a day laborer outside Home Depot, and I could immediately tell this guy had more natural talent than half the licensed contractors I'd encountered over the years. He just needed proper documentation and someone willing to give him a real opportunity. I made the decision to pay for his certification courses myself, which turned out to be the best investment I ever made. Carlos brought not just skill, but a work ethic that matched my own. Year 3 nearly destroyed everything I'd built when supply chain chaos hit the construction industry like a freight train. Lumber prices tripled literally overnight, and I had to have extremely uncomfortable conversations with clients about why their previously agreed-upon quotes suddenly needed to jump by 45%. I lost about half of our scheduled projects during that period because people simply couldn't or wouldn't pay the increased costs. I started hunting for materials like it was a competitive sport. I'd be driving to suppliers at 4 in the morning just to be first in line when they opened. I was constantly calling in favors from other contractors I'd helped out in the past, and we'd trade materials back and forth to make sure neither of our businesses went under. One particularly brutal week, I drove 1,400 miles between Nevada, California, and Utah, desperately hunting down specialty tiles that a client had insisted on for their project. I slept maybe 18 hours total during that entire week, running on nothing but coffee and sheer determination. The client never knew about any of this chaos behind the scenes. To them, their materials were simply delivered on schedule as promised. That's the kind of service that builds lasting relationships and referrals. Year 4 became the real turning point for my business. A local TV weather guy hired us for what seemed like a relatively small job at the time, but then he did something that changed everything. He posted about our work on Instagram. Within a single week, our social media following tripled. and suddenly we were getting inquiries from a completely different caliber of clients. This was when I made the strategic decision to start focusing exclusively on high-end projects. I actually turned down a $55,000 renovation project because I wanted to focus all our attention on a $135,000 build that I knew would get us noticed in the right circles. It was an incredibly risky move at the time, but I realized that playing it safe wasn't going to get me out of sleeping in that truck. The client whose renovation I turned down was absolutely furious and cussed me out over the phone for passing on their project. But here's the interesting part. 4 months later, that same person called me back, willing to pay double my original quote because they'd seen the quality of work we'd completed on other projects in the meantime. Fast forward to today, and we're now 22 employees strong with 3 crews running simultaneously. Our waiting list extends 4 months deep, and last quarter was our best financial performance ever. But here's what I'm really proud of. My flex isn't expensive cars or luxury watches. My flex is efficiency and treating my people right. Every foreman on my crews has a company credit card with spending caps that I monitor in real time. We invested in upgraded project management software last year that puts client quotes, change orders, and project schedules all in one centralized dashboard. This single change cut our administrative time almost in half, allowing us to focus more on actual work and client satisfaction. I fired a guy last year who showed up twice smelling like marijuana and full of excuses for his poor performance. I made sure to tell the entire crew exactly why he was let go, because I wanted everyone to understand that if someone can't show up on time, sober, and ready to work, they're not just hurting themselves, they're risking everyone else's paychecks. That's not workplace drama, that's simply policy and mutual respect. Every single dollar in my bank account I earned by breaking my back and outworking everyone else around me. No handouts, no family loans, no financial help from anyone. I mention this because it becomes important later. My family still treats me like I'm some broke teenager instead of someone who now out-earns both of my parents combined. It was actually at one of those high-end projects where I met Victoria. She's 29 and works as an interior designer for one of our clients. We were coordinating together on the outdoor kitchen finishes, making sure everything flowed seamlessly between the interior and exterior design elements. What immediately struck me about Victoria was how smart and gorgeous she is, but most importantly, she's refreshingly direct in her communication. None of that playing hard to get nonsense that wastes everyone's time. She initially texted me about granite samples we were discussing for the project, but then she added something that caught me completely off guard. "You free Saturday? I know a place with decent sushi." I appreciated her straightforward approach. No games, no mixed signals, just honest interest. As we got to know each other, I learned that Victoria had grown up with her grandmother after her parents essentially abandoned her when she was just 7 years old. She worked her way through design school while simultaneously taking care of her grandmother, who was battling dementia. This woman truly understands what real struggle looks like, which is probably why we connected so quickly. When we started dating seriously, Victoria would sometimes stop by my job sites with coffee. Not just for me, but for the entire crew. That simple gesture told me everything I needed to know about her character. She didn't just respect the final result of our work. She respected the actual work itself and the people doing it. That's incredibly rare and showed me she was genuinely different from anyone I'd dated before. Now let me give you a quick breakdown of my family situation, because understanding these dynamics is crucial to the story. My dad, Robert, is 59 years old and manages a grocery chain district, making around $82,000 annually. My mom, Linda, is 55 and works as an elementary school administrator. Then there's my sister, Casey, who's 33 and claims to be a marketing consultant, but hasn't had a legitimate client in years. Casey currently lives in my parents' basement while pretending to run some kind of business empire from her Instagram account. Her room is exactly as she left it when she graduated high school, complete with participation trophies and boy band posters still hanging on the walls. She's just added a ring light and a girl boss motivational sign for the daily inspiration videos she posts that consistently get about 14 views. Growing up, the family dynamic was crystal clear and never changed. Casey could do absolutely no wrong, and I could do absolutely no right. When she dropped out of college during her senior year to find herself backpacking through Europe, my parents called it a brave journey of self-discovery. When I worked construction jobs during summers to pay for business school, they dismissed it as settling for manual labor and not applying myself properly. My dad would actually walk through our job sites pointing out what he claimed were mistakes, but they were actually just unfinished work that we were still in the process of completing. He still does this to this day. Last year, he visited the $320,000 lake house project we were building and told the homeowner within earshot that the slope looks off on that deck. It wasn't off at all. We were literally in the middle of laser leveling the supports when he made that comment. The homeowner got nervous until I had to pull out the architectural plans and show him our precision equipment to prove everything was exactly to specification. My mom wasn't much better with her passive-aggressive comments. When I made Dean's List 4 semesters straight during business school, her response was, "If only you applied yourself like this in high school." What she conveniently ignored was that I was working 32 hours a week during college to pay my expenses, and in high school I was working 16 hours a week while also playing sports. But somehow my achievements were never quite good enough or came with conditions attached. Casey has been an absolute nightmare since day one, but let me give you some specific examples. 4 years ago at Thanksgiving, she announced she was going plant-based, literally as my mom was putting the turkey on the table. She made this huge theatrical show of eating only side dishes while making exaggerated gagging noises whenever someone cut into the meat. This is the same Casey who I had personally seen demolishing a bacon cheeseburger just the week before, when I pointed out the hypocrisy by saying, "Funny how your plant-based diet includes those leather boots you bought last week?" She actually threw cranberry sauce at me across the dinner table. I just calmly wiped it off my shirt and kept eating, while everyone else pretended not to notice what had just happened. Another time, at my cousin's wedding, she cornered me to explain in great detail how my landscaping business was supposedly destroying the environment because concrete production creates carbon emissions. This lecture came from someone who takes 45-minute showers daily and leaves every single light on in the house when she leaves. When I asked her how she enjoyed driving her gas-guzzling SUV to the salon for her weekly blowout appointment, she didn't speak to me for 3 months. Those were honestly the most peaceful 3 months of my life. The hypocrisy is what really gets under my skin. She constantly preaches about sustainability while buying fast fashion clothing every single week. She posts lengthy rants about income inequality, but hasn't worked a legitimate job in years. She shares motivational content about hustle culture while sleeping until noon every day and contributing absolutely nothing to society. Victoria met my family for the first time last Christmas, and it was quite the experience. Casey showed up with this incredibly skinny guy wearing a turtleneck, despite it being Las Vegas in December, who she introduced as her business partner. They spent the entire dinner talking about their supposedly revolutionary wellness platform that would completely disrupt the mindfulness space. This app they were developing supposedly combined meditation, cryptocurrency, and social media into one platform. It was basically the startup equivalent of throwing random Silicon Valley buzzwords into a blender and hoping something coherent would come out. When I started asking basic business questions like what their revenue model was or how they planned to acquire users, Casey immediately got defensive and said that not everything was about money. I just smirked and replied, "Hard to make a difference from Mom's basement." Dad nearly choked on his water trying not to laugh. After dinner, Casey cornered Victoria in the kitchen while I was grabbing drinks from the garage. When I walked back in, I heard Casey saying something about how my little landscaping phase wouldn't last forever, and how Victoria should probably have a backup plan for when it all inevitably falls apart. Victoria just smiled sweetly and said, "Actually, I've seen his financial books. Maybe you should ask him for investment advice instead of whatever that turtleneck guy is trying to sell you." Casey stormed off in a huff, and Victoria just winked at me. That's my girl right there. I've always absolutely hated family gatherings, but skipping them consistently results in weeks of passive-aggressive text messages about how I think I'm too important for family now. So I typically just show up, keep my head down, and count the minutes until I can politely leave without causing a major scene. About a week before Mother's Day this year, I called my dad to ask about their plans for the holiday. His tone was weirdly casual when he answered, almost dismissive. "We're just doing a small thing this year," he said. "Your mom wants to keep it low-key." I figured that meant the usual routine. Lunch at their place, some flowers, nothing particularly special or elaborate. But before hanging up, he added something that should have been a red flag. "Actually, don't bother coming this time. No need for gifts either. Just focus on your business." For a brief second, I actually felt something like relief. The drive from Las Vegas to their place is a real pain in the ass, and maybe they finally understood that I was building something legitimate and didn't have time for their usual drama. But 18 years of family dynamics had taught me to be suspicious of anything that seemed too good to be true. Something about his tone didn't sit right with me, even though I couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was. 3 days later, I was having drinks with my buddy Tyler at our usual spot. We met back in business school, and he now runs his own successful plumbing company. Our conversations typically revolve around real business issues: supplier problems, employee management challenges, expansion strategies, actual business topics, not Instagram follower counts and made-up metrics. When I told Tyler about my dad's phone call, he looked immediately skeptical. "That sounds like a trap to me," he said, shaking his head. "If you don't show up, you're suddenly the asshole who skipped Mother's Day. But if you do show up after being told not to, they'll act like you're imposing on their plans." Tyler had met my family a few times over the years and understood their particular brand of dysfunction. Victoria joined us after finishing up with a client, and when I filled her in on the conversation, she agreed with Tyler's assessment. "Your sister's been posting all week about some big Mother's Day surprise she's planning," Victoria said. "Something's definitely up." Victoria follows Casey on social media purely for intelligence-gathering purposes. She says it's like keeping tabs on a particularly unstable weather system that might cause problems. Tyler's words really stuck with me over the next few days. I started thinking that I needed a gift that would be absolutely impossible for them to dismiss or minimize. Then I remembered a conversation from several years ago when my mom had mentioned wanting to visit Moonrise, this incredibly fancy wellness retreat up in Napa Valley. She had called it her dream getaway, but said it was far too expensive for them to ever afford. Dad had just laughed it off at the time, saying, "Maybe when we win the lottery." The next morning at my office, I decided to look up Moonrise Napa Valley online. They had this rejuvenation weekend package that looked perfect. 4 days and 3 nights with spa treatments, guided meditation sessions, hiking excursions, and all meals included. The total cost was $4,200 for 2 people. 6 years ago, that amount would have represented my entire emergency fund and then some. These days, I could write that check without even blinking or affecting my monthly budget. Business had been incredibly good lately. We had just finished a $245,000 backyard project for a tech executive that came in both under budget and ahead of schedule. The client was so thrilled with our work that he was already referring friends and colleagues to us. I called Moonrise and booked the package for the weekend immediately after Mother's Day, put my parents' names down on the reservation, and paid the full amount up front. I even arranged for a bottle of champagne to be waiting in their room upon arrival. For once in my life, I was actually looking forward to a family event. I should have known better than to let my guard down. Sunday morning, Victoria and I made the 3-hour drive from Las Vegas to Reno for what I thought would be a simple Mother's Day visit. I had told Carlos I'd be unavailable all day, which was honestly a rare occurrence since I'm usually answering client calls 7 days a week. As soon as I turned onto my parents' street, I immediately knew something was very wrong. Both sides of the street were completely lined with cars. I started counting and got to at least 17 vehicles, including my aunt's Range Rover and my uncle's ridiculous Hummer that he bought specifically for off-roading but has never actually taken off a paved road in its entire life. I had to park 4 houses down from my parents' place and walk up the street carrying the envelope that contained the retreat reservations. Victoria walked beside me, looking absolutely incredible in a simple green dress, but I could feel her squeezing my hand as she sensed my growing tension. The front door was unlocked, so I let myself in and followed the noise toward the backyard. Just as I reached the patio doors, I heard my uncle's voice clearly. "I thought Marcus wasn't coming today." Then I heard my dad's response, which hit me like a punch to the gut. "He said he couldn't make it. Probably for the best. That douche would just bring down the mood with his contractor stories. At least we have Casey here showing us her new presentation." I froze completely, hidden by the doorframe, trying to process what I had just heard. Victoria's grip on my hand tightened significantly as she heard it too. When I finally stepped outside, I could see that the backyard had been completely transformed. There were multiple tables decorated with elaborate flower arrangements, a huge Happy Mother's Day Linda banner stretched across the patio, and catering staff setting up what looked like a gourmet spread. At least 35 people were mingling on the professionally landscaped patio, the same patio that I had offered to renovate for free 4 years ago. But they had declined because your sister's friend knows a guy. My cousin Brandon spotted me first and called out, "Holy shit, Marcus is here! Welcome, bro!" Every single head in the backyard turned to stare at me. My dad quickly tried to recover with a dismissive wave, saying, "Just joking around, son," before immediately turning away to talk to my uncle like I wasn't even standing there. As I stepped fully into the backyard, the whispers started immediately. I caught fragments of conversations. comments about me showing up empty-handed, still driving the same work truck, and how Casey had just secured a big investor for her app. I heard phrases like, must not be doing as well as he claims, and still has dirt under his fingernails. That last comment was actually accurate. I had been helping one of my crews with some stonework the day before, because one of the guys had called in sick. The owner still gets his hands dirty when his team needs help. Imagine that concept. I spotted Casey holding court near the bar area, wearing oversized designer sunglasses and gesturing dramatically to a group of relatives hanging on her every word. When she noticed me, she smirked and whispered something to our cousin, who immediately giggled in response. Then her eyes landed on Victoria, and I watched them roll instantly in that familiar, dismissive way. I made my way toward my mom, who was positioned at the main table like the guest of honor. When she saw me approaching, she frowned and asked, "Why didn't you call about coming today?" Then she looked down at my hands with obvious disappointment. "You didn't even bring anything for your mother?" Casey immediately chimed in from behind me. "Wow, real classy, Marcus." Then she turned to Victoria with the fakest smile I'd ever seen and said, "And you brought your girlfriend. How nice. Did you know this is a family event?" Victoria didn't miss a beat. She smiled back just as sweetly and said, "I'm his fiancé, actually. We got engaged last month." She held up her left hand, showing off the ring I had proposed with after we landed our biggest contract to date. I guess our announcement got lost in the mail, just like our invitation to this gathering. I started to reach for the envelope in my pocket containing the retreat reservation, but I stopped myself. The setup was becoming crystal clear to me. This wasn't some last-minute gathering that they forgot to mention. This was a carefully planned event that I had been deliberately excluded from. Just then, Casey's business partner Nathan approached our little group. He was wearing another one of those ridiculous turtlenecks despite the 89-degree heat, looking like a Silicon Valley stereotype playing dress-up. He had on those minimalist sneakers that probably cost $450, but look exactly like hospital shoes. Nathan made some condescending comment about my landscaping work, asking if I'd ever thought about getting into tech since that's supposedly where all the real money is these days. This comment came from a guy who hasn't actually shipped a working product yet. I casually mentioned that we had just finished a major project for Brad, the CFO of the company that had rejected their app investment pitch last month. "Nice guy, Brad," I said with a smile. "He mentioned something about your pitch deck having some unrealistic projections. Small world, isn't it?" Nathan's smug expression vanished completely while Casey's eyes narrowed into slits. I spotted an empty chair near my cousin Brandon and started heading toward it with Victoria by my side. Brandon has always been cool with me. He's a firefighter who hates bullshit just as much as I do. But just as I was about to sit down, Casey appeared again like a bad rash, telling me that chair was actually Nathan's seat. She looked pointedly at Victoria and added, "And I'm not sure where your +1 is supposed to sit. We didn't plan for extras." Brandon stood up immediately and said, "I'll help you grab some chairs," following me toward the house. As we walked to the garage, he whispered, "What the hell is going on, man? Dad told me this was supposed to be a small family thing. Then 3 days ago, Aunt Linda called saying it turned into this whole catered event. Every time I asked who was coming, she kept changing the subject. Now I understand why." "Apparently, I didn't make the guest list," I replied, grabbing 2 metal folding chairs from the garage. We returned to the backyard and set them up at the very edge of the patio. Brandon made a point of placing his chair right next to mine instead of returning to his original table, a small gesture that meant more to me than he probably realized. At noon, my dad clinked his glass loudly to get everyone's attention. He announced that it was time to celebrate our wonderful Linda and invited everyone to enjoy lunch from the professional caterer they'd hired. After the obligatory singing of Happy Mother's Day and what felt like hundreds of photos, people began lining up at the elaborate catering table. I was just about to join the line when my dad's voice boomed across the entire backyard. "Marcus, we didn't include you in the head count for the caterer. Just grab a drink or something." The entire backyard fell completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. I stared at my father, trying to process what he had just said in front of 35 relatives. "What? Are you kidding me right now?" The words came out automatically. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Language, Marcus," he replied sternly. "And no, I'm not kidding. We paid $38 per person for this food and you weren't on our list." I looked around at the faces surrounding me. Some looked genuinely embarrassed by what was happening. Others were clearly enjoying the drama. And most people had suddenly become very interested in studying their drinks. Then my mom stood up, straightening her blouse with that self-righteous expression I knew so well. Marcus, we told you not to come today. You chose to ignore that instruction. We can't just magically make food appear out of thin air. Brandon immediately spoke up, trying to defuse the situation. Mrs. Linda, Marcus can share my plate. I won't eat much anyway. Come on, this is ridiculous. But my dad waved his hand dismissively and said, Nah, he showed up uninvited. He can wait until everyone else has finished eating. If there's anything left over, then we'll see. Since when do I need a formal invitation to see my mother on Mother's Day? I asked, my voice rising slightly. You want me to wait until everyone's done eating like I'm some kind of stray dog? Victoria stepped forward and said, So just to be absolutely clear, you're telling your own son that he can't eat at your family gathering because you didn't budget for him? Her voice was calm, but carried an edge that made several people shift uncomfortably. Casey jumped into the fray, attacking Victoria directly. Nobody asked for your opinion. You don't even belong here, so keep your mouth shut. That was the final straw for me. I pointed directly at Casey and said, Watch your mouth. You don't get to talk to her like that. Neither does Marcus, apparently, Victoria shot back, her patience finally exhausted. She turned to me and said, Babe, we can grab lunch on the way home. This isn't worth our time or energy. That was the moment when something inside me just snapped. Not in a rage-filled way, but in a crystal clarity way. Like when you've been staring at a complex blueprint for hours and suddenly see the obvious solution that was right in front of you the entire time. Just so you all know, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear, I actually did bring something. I pulled the envelope out of my pocket and held it up. I handed it to Brandon and said, Will you open this for me, bro? He looked confused, but carefully opened the envelope. His eyes widened significantly as he read the reservation confirmation. At my request, he read it out loud for everyone to hear. Moonrise Wellness Retreat, Napa Valley. Premium rejuvenation package for 2 guests. 4 days and 3 nights in a Mountain View suite. All meals, spa treatments, and activities included. Guests listed as Robert and Linda. Total value, $4,200. Paid in full. Holy shit, Marcus, Brandon said, staring at the paper in disbelief. Everyone in the backyard fell completely silent. I could see several relatives immediately pulling out their phones to verify the price I just mentioned. My Aunt Candace was frantically scrolling through the Moonrise website, her eyes widening as she looked at the photos of the luxury accommodations. You literally could have heard a pin drop in that backyard. My mom's mouth fell open, and she looked like she'd been slapped. Then they immediately tried to backpedal and salvage the situation. Marcus, we didn't know you had brought anything, my mom finally managed to say, her voice suddenly much softer. Clearly, I replied evenly, letting the word hang in the air. Look, we were just joking around, my dad said, forcing a laugh that fooled absolutely nobody. You know how family can be sometimes. Sit down and have some food with us. But I remained standing. That package includes couples massage sessions, guided meditation hikes through the mountains, and a private dinner on the terrace overlooking the Napa Valley, I explained to the captivated audience. Everything Mom mentioned wanting to do someday when you finally had the money for it. Nathan, still trying to insert himself into conversations where he didn't belong, attempted to interject with some nonsense. Linda, sometimes the universe works in mysterious ways. Perhaps this retreat could be a sign that... Shut up, Nathan, came from several people simultaneously, which was honestly the first thing the entire family had agreed on all day. I turned back to Brandon, who was still holding the reservation papers. Those reservations are currently in my parents' names, but they can be transferred to anyone I choose. I'd like you and Melissa to have them instead. Brandon looked absolutely stunned. Marcus, this was meant for your parents, he said, though his expression clearly showed he was thinking about the $4,200 value and what that kind of getaway would mean for him and his wife. Not anymore, I said firmly. My parents made it crystal clear today exactly where I stand in this family hierarchy. My dad stepped forward, his face turning red with anger. You can't do that. Those are our reservations. Actually, they're my reservations, I corrected him. I paid for them with my money and I can give them to whoever I want. I turned back to Brandon. You and Melissa haven't had a real vacation since the twins were born 4 years ago, right? Marcus, please, my mom tried desperately, her voice suddenly sweet and pleading. We were just surprised to see you here today. You know we love you. We can all sit down and talk about this later as a family. I actually laughed out loud at that. Yeah, sure we can. I told Brandon I'd call Moonrise first thing the next morning to change the names on the reservation and text him all the details. "You're making a scene," Casey hissed at me, looking around nervously at all the stunned relatives who were witnessing this family meltdown. "No, you all made the scene," I replied calmly. "I'm just finally walking off the set." As I headed toward the gate to leave with Victoria at my side, my cousin Madison called out that she was coming with us. Madison is Casey's younger sister who moved to Oregon a few years ago for a web design job. When I told her she didn't have to leave on our account, she insisted, saying what they had done was completely messed up and she'd been watching this kind of nonsense for years. "Someone finally said what needed to be said," she muttered while grabbing her jacket. "I've been biting my tongue since 2016. Brandon joined our exodus, returning the envelope to me and telling me to keep it safe until tomorrow when I made the transfer call. He was already texting Melissa about their unexpected vacation plans. To my surprise, my Uncle Frank, Dad's younger brother, who moved to Alaska years ago and became the family's black sheep, was leaning against my truck when we reached the street. He had flown down for this special Mother's Day event, thinking that maybe things might have changed after 12 years of minimal contact. One look at the situation had told him they definitely hadn't. "Some things never change," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. I was about to make my own exit too. "Mind if I join you guys?" The five of us ended up at a nearby sports bar, ordering massive amounts of food and swapping family war stories. Uncle Frank had built a successful fishing charter business up in Alaska after cutting almost all contact with the family. Madison was absolutely killing it as a freelance web designer, and Brandon, while genuinely happy as a firefighter, was dealing with his own share of family drama and politics. Between bites of a burger that tasted 12 times better than any catered food could have, Uncle Frank explained that my parents had always cared more about appearances than actual reality. They would rather have a prestigious daughter who was actually broke than acknowledge a successful son in what they considered a blue-collar business. "Your dad wanted to be an architect, but couldn't handle the math requirements," he revealed. "So he manages grocery stores, but pretends he's some kind of corporate executive. Your success reminds him of everything he couldn't achieve himself." Then Madison dropped some information that completely blew my mind. She revealed that Casey hadn't had a legitimate client in over a year. She literally lived in their basement making fake business calls all day, sometimes talking to herself with no one actually on the other end of the line. She drove for DoorDash 4 nights a week to make money, but told everyone she was networking with high-level executives. "Last month, she asked me to pretend to be a Silicon Valley investor on a Zoom call," Madison said, shaking her head. "She wanted me to speak with a British accent for some reason. When I refused, she got mad and blocked me for a week. That explained perfectly why my success bothered them so much. Their golden child was actually failing miserably while I was thriving, but they couldn't bring themselves to admit it. It was easier to keep pretending and living in denial, even when the evidence of reality was staring them directly in the face." Victoria then mentioned something that made me laugh even harder. She told us that Casey had actually DM'd her last month, asking if we needed a brand ambassador for my company because of her excellent social media presence. This message came barely a week after Casey had gone on Instagram Live ranting about how capitalism exploits creative people and destroys authentic artistic expression. Victoria hadn't bothered responding to the message, but she showed it to me on her phone. Casey's last post had received exactly 9 likes, including one from an NFT bot offering investment synergy opportunities. I nearly choked on my water laughing. "You don't hire the person who tried to light your truck on fire just because you're suddenly low on gas," I said. "Guess she couldn't find the right filter for that level of desperation," Victoria added, which made me laugh so hard I nearly spit out my drink. The irony was absolutely perfect. Casey, who had been criticizing my business and calling it unsustainable for years, was secretly hoping to work for me. She wanted to capitalize on the success she'd been publicly dismissing. Brandon suddenly brought up something that hit me right in the feelings. He mentioned Melissa's emergency gallbladder surgery last year, when they were short on their mortgage payment due to unexpected medical bills. Someone had anonymously paid the difference, and they had always wondered who it was but never found out. I tried to change the subject, but Brandon kept pressing for details. Finally, I just shrugged and said, "You guys brought us dinner every single night for a week when I broke my ankle on that job site 4 years ago. Melissa watched my dog when I had to fly out for that emergency supplier meeting. What goes around comes around." "Shit, man," Brandon said, looking genuinely moved. "And today they wouldn't even let you eat at their table." We spent some time discussing my plan going forward, which was a complete cutoff from my immediate family. Uncle Frank strongly approved, saying it was the best decision he had ever made for his own mental health and peace of mind. "The first year is tough, I won't lie to you," he warned. "But after that comes real freedom. They'll try everything in the book," he continued. Guilt trips, manufactured health scares, fake financial emergencies, you name it. Stay strong. Your real family is sitting at this table right now. Madison invited Victoria and me to her housewarming party in Portland the following month, offering to introduce us to people who aren't completely self-absorbed narcissists. "Plus, we can go mountain biking if you're into that kind of thing," she added. There's a whole lot more to life than family drama. For the first time that entire day, I felt something that resembled genuine peace. The fallout from that Mother's Day disaster was immediate and intense. By the time Victoria and I got back to Las Vegas that night, I had 19 missed calls and 36 text messages waiting for me. I ignored every single one of them and slept better than I had in years. First thing Monday morning, I called my attorney, Jessica. We had originally met when I needed contracts drafted for the business 4 years ago, and she'd handled several legal issues for me since then. I asked her to update my will and business succession plan with what she called the nuclear option, a no-blood clause that explicitly excluded my parents and sister from any inheritance or business interest, regardless of circumstances. When Jessica noted that this was a pretty definitive move, I simply told her that recent events had clarified my priorities completely. "Families are complicated," she said diplomatically, not pressing for details. "This is exactly why I like working with Jessica. No unnecessary questions, just efficient legal solutions." 2 days later, I signed all the paperwork. My estate would now go to a combination of trusted employees like Carlos, a scholarship fund I was establishing for trade school students, and specific relatives like Brandon, Madison, and Uncle Frank. My parents and Casey were explicitly excluded with language, stating that any attempt to contest the will would trigger a penalty clause directing additional funds to charities they would absolutely hate. Jessica suggested environmental causes, knowing my sister's incredible hypocrisy around her own carbon footprint. The irony was too perfect to pass up. Next, I called Moonrise and officially transferred the reservation to Brandon and Melissa. Then I blocked my parents' and Casey's phone numbers and went back to focusing on work. Business was absolutely booming. We had just landed a contract to build a custom pool and outdoor kitchen for a local news anchor. That same week, I promoted Carlos to operations director and gave him a 17% raise. He had more than earned it by stepping up during all the personal chaos and keeping our job sites running on schedule while I dealt with family drama. That's what real loyalty looks like. Showing up when things get difficult. 4 weeks later, my parents and sister showed up at my office without any appointment. Laura, our receptionist, buzzed me on the intercom. "There's a Robert, Linda, and Casey here to see you. No appointment scheduled. They claim it's urgent family business." I told her to send them back to my office. I figured I might as well rip off the Band-Aid and get this confrontation over with. When they walked into my office, they looked nothing like the confident, superior people from Mother's Day. My mom looked completely exhausted. My dad's posture was slumped and defeated, and even Casey looked disheveled. Gone was the designer outfit, replaced with what looked like actual business casual attire, like she was playing dress-up for a loan request, which I immediately realized was probably exactly what this was. My dad awkwardly complimented my office space, looking around at the modern design with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Las Vegas. "Real professional setup you've got here," he said, as if he was genuinely surprised. "Those awards on the wall, are they real?" "No, Dad," I replied dryly. "I bought fake awards to impress clients. What do you want?" "Is that any way to greet your family?" my mom asked, trying to sound hurt. "We haven't heard from you in weeks." I cut straight to the chase and asked them what they wanted. Mom claimed they were just worried about me and wanted to check in, but I immediately called bullshit and told them they were obviously there because they wanted something from me. Casey mentioned something vague about family drama. Apparently, Aunt Karen wasn't speaking to Dad anymore. Madison had blocked Mom on all social media platforms, and Uncle Frank had sent everyone an email calling them toxic and explaining exactly why he was cutting contact again. I just smiled and said that sounded like their problem, not mine. My dad attempted what he probably thought was an apology, calling their behavior at Mother's Day inappropriate. I pointed out that inappropriate didn't even begin to describe telling someone they couldn't eat at a family gathering or calling them a loser in front of 35 relatives. That was a momentary lapse in judgment, he said, like he was describing forgetting to signal a lane change instead of publicly humiliating his own son. After some more back and forth, my dad finally admitted the real reason for their visit. They needed about $27,000 due to what he vaguely called financial difficulties. That was it. Not a genuine apology, but a cash request. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place immediately. When I asked what specifically the money was for, they hesitated and looked uncomfortable before Dad finally admitted it was for Casey's wellness app. They had invested their retirement savings as seed money for her ridiculous business venture, and now the developer needed another $27,000 to supposedly finish the platform. I actually laughed out loud and correctly guessed that the first $32,000 had gone toward a fancy logo design, professional photo shoots for Instagram content, and gold foil business cards instead of any actual software development. Let me guess, I said. The developer is Nathan's cousin who builds WordPress sites part-time? Casey's expression confirmed everything without her saying a single word. These people were complete amateurs. I explained to them that Nathan was obviously scamming them, and they had essentially mortgaged their retirement to fund Casey's vanity project without asking a single critical business question. I could have introduced you to legitimate developers who would have built a working prototype for $6,000 before you committed another dime, I told them. But you never asked for my expertise because to you, I'm just the guy who plays with dirt for a living. Hell, for $27,000 I could have hired 3 junior developers and a UI designer off Upwork to build a working MVP with integrated analytics and a user feedback loop, I continued. Instead, they blew your money on logo design, gold foil business cards, and paying some vegan TikTok influencer to promote an app that doesn't actually exist. She deleted the promotional video after 41 hours. 0 users, 0 feedback, 0 actual product. But hey, at least the non-existent app had good vibes. When my mom asked if I wouldn't help them out, I stated clearly that if they had treated me with even basic human decency, I probably would have helped without hesitation. I had helped my employees through tough financial times. I'd paid for Carlos's son's emergency surgery last year without thinking twice about it. But they were literally the last people on earth I would give money to. It's not about the money, I explained to them. I made more than your loan amount last month in pure profit. It's about the consistent pattern of behavior that led us to this exact moment. My mom whispered something about family obligations, and I firmly corrected her. We share DNA, but that's not the same thing as being family. I stood up and mentioned that Brandon and Melissa had just had a wonderful time at Moonrise. I showed them the photos they'd sent me, including one of them raising champagne glasses on the Mountain View Terrace at sunset. That should have been my parents, I said, letting the words sink in. My dad got angry and asked if that was really it. Years of raising you, and you just cut us off like that? You raised me to be self-sufficient, I replied calmly. Congratulations, it worked perfectly. Casey tried one more desperate angle, claiming she had a job offer in Chicago and needed $3,500 for an apartment security deposit. I simply congratulated her on the opportunity and suggested she call a bank for a personal loan. Banks require income verification, she muttered under her breath. So do I replied without missing a beat. My mom made one final plea, saying they knew they had messed up badly and wanted a chance to make things right between us. I offered to send them the contact information for a financial advisor who helps people restructure debt and get their finances back on track. I even said I'd pay for their initial consultation. That's it, my dad protested. That's not nearly enough. It's more than you deserve, I replied calmly, and it's my final offer. I asked them to leave my office. If you ever want a real relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than what I can financially do for you, the door remains open, I said. But it'll be on entirely new terms, and those terms are non-negotiable. After they left, Carlos came by my office to check on me. I told him I was doing better than good, and then I asked about his house hunting progress. When he mentioned how difficult the current market was, I offered him a friends and family discount on renovation work to help make a fixer-upper more affordable for his growing family. You sure you want to mix business with friendship? He asked, looking concerned. You're not a friend, I replied with a smile. You're family. 4 months have passed since that confrontation, and my parents occasionally try to contact me through various relatives. But I've made my position crystal clear to everyone. Instead of the family I was born into, I've built something infinitely better. A circle of people who actually value and respect each other. Last weekend, I flew up to Portland for Madison's housewarming party. Uncle Frank came down from Alaska specifically for it, and Brandon and Melissa drove up from Reno with the twins. Victoria and I finalized our wedding details while we were there. The ceremony is scheduled for next month at a beautiful venue overlooking Red Rock Canyon. We've already decided that my parents and sister won't be receiving invitations. My company just broke ground on our biggest project to date, a complete backyard transformation for a former NBA player that will be featured in a major home design magazine. We're expanding to a second location next quarter, and I'm bringing Carlos in as a junior partner in the business. He nearly broke down and cried when I told him the news. He said he never expected to own part of a business in America when he crossed the border 12 years ago with nothing but hope and determination. As for my parents and Casey, I heard through Brandon that my dad's wellness app investment is completely gone. The developer disappeared with all their money, just as I had predicted. Casey's mysterious job offer in Chicago mysteriously fell through as well. Now they're telling everyone who will listen that I abandoned the family in their time of greatest need. But here's the thing. For the first time in my entire life, I genuinely don't care what they say about me. I'm too busy building something real and meaningful, which, as it turns out, actually matters in the long run. When the dust finally settles, Victoria and I are getting married next weekend. We're keeping the ceremony small and intimate, inviting only the people who actually support us and want to see us succeed. Uncle Frank is officiating the ceremony. Carlos is serving as my best man, and Madison is helping coordinate all the details. Brandon and Melissa are bringing the twins, who will be our flower girl and ring bearer. No drama, no passive-aggressive comments, no one telling me I can't eat the food at my own wedding reception. We even had assigned seating professionally done, with Victoria's friend creating beautiful calligraphy place cards for everyone. When one of Brandon's cousins jokingly asked if Casey had a reserved seat somewhere, I just smiled and said, "We didn't budget for extras." Uncle Frank nearly snorted his drink when he heard that, and the entire table cracked up laughing. It felt like quiet justice, the best kind of justice. Just the family we chose celebrating something genuine and meaningful. The wedding venue overlooks the stunning Red Rock Canyon, and we've planned everything ourselves without any interference or unwanted opinions from toxic family members. Victoria looks absolutely radiant in her dress, and I can honestly say I've never been happier in my entire life. My business continues to thrive beyond my wildest expectations. We just signed contracts for 3 more high-end projects, including a complete outdoor living space for a tech executive who saw our work featured in that home design magazine. Carlos has stepped seamlessly into his new role as junior partner, and we're already discussing opening that second location ahead of schedule. The scholarship fund I established for trade school students has already helped 5 young people get the training they need to start their own careers. Seeing their gratitude and determination reminds me why I work so hard. Not for people who take everything for granted, but for those who truly appreciate opportunities and make the most of them. So here's my question for everyone. Am I the asshole for canceling my family's expensive retreat after they humiliated me on Mother's Day and told me I couldn't eat because they didn't budget for me? Looking back, I realize this whole experience taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. Family isn't about shared DNA or obligation. It's about the people who show up for you, support your dreams, and treat you with basic human decency. Sometimes the family you choose is infinitely better than the one you're born into. And honestly, I've never been more at peace with my decisions.